Disney's first water park, River Country, opened in 1976, but after 25 years, it unexpectedly and permanently closed. After that, the water park sat abandoned, decaying. And in 2014, my senior year of high school, I had the opportunity to visit the abandoned water park. And this is that story. Welcome back to our channel. I am Mouselet2, and I am a lover of all things Disney history and abandoned Disney. And today we're going to be diving into the time that I legally, let me make that clear, visited Disney's abandoned water park, River Country. Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to our channel because every Monday for Mouselets Monday, we are dropping deep dives on some of the most interesting Disney topics. And River Country, of all things that Disney abandoned, might be the most fascinating. So let's dive into it. I distinctly remember the first time that I discovered what River Country was. My sister was sitting at our family's only desktop computer scrolling on the internet, and she clicked on one of those clickbaity articles that popped up that Disney had an abandoned water park. Now, at the time, our family went to Disney once per year, every single year, and we went to Blizzard Beach all the time. So we really didn't believe that there was an abandoned water park. But nope, there was. The pictures of the abandoned slides are burned permanently in my mind, and we literally couldn't believe that Disney would just abandon a water park. The Disney that we know and love that creates these amazing things, why would they do that? So from then on, I became fascinated with all things River Country, and I still am today. But before I can dive into my experience at River Country and what I got to see, first we need to cover a little bit of history about this water park. If you've been watching our Mouselets Mondays deep dives, you know for the past couple of months, I've been covering something called the Vacation Kingdom. If you're new to this channel, I'm going to link the video where I did a deep dive on the Vacation Kingdom because it is very helpful for context. But if you don't want to listen to that or you just need a refresher, basically in the early 1970s, the only main attraction at Walt Disney World was Magic Kingdom. They didn't have any other theme parks. And so in order to get people to stay on site longer, Disney created something that they called the Vacation Kingdom. This meant that in addition to the Magic Kingdom theme park, they were adding all sorts of activities across property: surfing, sailing, swimming in the lakes, water skiing, archery, tennis, and horseback riding. That was really the very initial phase one. But as a part of a phase two expansion, they planned to add even more activities like Discovery Island, which we covered 2 weeks ago, or River Country. And so in 1975, they announced a huge expansion coming to the Fort Wilderness Campground. It was going to be a major themed swimming and water recreational complex. Construction cost about $2 million, and it opened up on June 20th of 1976, Disney's first water park ever, River Country. Instantly, it was a huge success. In its first year, 868,000 people visited. They grossed between $3 and $4 million, making back those construction costs super easily. River Country was unique in that it didn't have parking that was super accessible to guests. Instead, they would drive to the Fort Wilderness Campground, park their cars there, and then they would hop on the Fort Wilderness Railroad. In the early days of the campground, the transportation system that would get guests to and from different locations was the Fort Wilderness Railroad. It was sort of like the Walt Disney World Railroad. It literally was a steam engine train, and it traveled in a big loop around the property. Guests would get off at the settlement posts, and that's where they could walk to River Country. And so despite the fact that River Country was located in the back of Fort Wilderness and not all that accessible, Disney wasn't worried because they had this great railroad system. But unfortunately, 4 years after River Country opened, the railroad permanently closed. That was in the year of 1980. Disney first replaced it with trams and then eventually replaced it with a bus system, which is pretty similar to the bus loops that are there today. So there was a little bit of a hiccup with access for guests not staying at the campground to get to River Country. But despite that, it was a very popular destination. So let's get into a little bit more about what this park had to offer. So as I said, it was located in the back of the Fort Wilderness Campground, right on the Bay Lake shores, right near Discovery Island, actually. The first thing you would see when you were entering were 2 ticket booths, as well as a big River Country water tower. Then you would walk in and it would have the typical setup that Disney actually bases all of their water parks of. If you've been to Blizzard Beach or Typhoon Lagoon, you know that the front entrance of the park doesn't have slides and pools immediately. Instead, it has a place to get towels and dressing rooms, restrooms. It might have a gift shop, which River Country did have. It has some food stands and snacks. So that whole front entrance was kind of the main complex. The second half, the back of the park, that's where all of the pools and the slides were. And this whole front entrance area will end up being incredibly important to the story and also explains some of the lies and misinformation that other urban explorers shared. But we'll get to that in a minute. Let's continue talking about what else River Country had. So as I mentioned, it did have a gift shop called River Relics, and I personally have a t-shirt from River Country that I bought on eBay. It had Pop's Place and the Watering Hole. These were both locations you could get refreshments, coffee, drinks, things like that. They sold peanut butter and jelly sandwich and baked beans, among other things. It had a cookout pavilion, not technically a part of River Country, but it was used for a rain shelter during storms. This is where Mickey's Backyard Barbecue was located. And it had another pretty unique offering called the Cypress Point Nature Trail. Just like Typhoon Lagoon had some nature trails, River Country was actually the one that did it first. It was located on the east side of the park, and it took guests on boardwalk walkways out onto the lake and then back in. It wasn't super long, but it was a fun activity for guests to do that didn't involve getting wet. But now let's talk about the actual water attractions that they had, because River Country was pretty unique in this way too. Overall, it had three sort of distinct pool areas. The first pool was the upstream plunge pool. This was a kidney-shaped pool that just used typical pool water. And here they had the slippery slide falls. These were at the top of a rock embankment. It was a 7-foot drop, and the slides were not fully connected to the water. These slides are really iconic to River Country. It was used in a lot of the promotional materials, and there's a ton of pictures of these out there. The next area is the Kiddie Cove area. This had 4 slides built for kids, as well as a small wading pool, and was separated from the main area by the Barrel Bridge. And the most iconic part, the Bay Cove area. What made the Bay Cove so unique is that it actually used filtered lake water. So it had a sand bottom, and then it used the same water from Bay Lake, but it had a dam filter separating it to keep that water filtered, since it did run through all of the water slides in the systems. This really was the main attraction. It had a beach, it had the iconic boom swing, it had a tire swing, it had the whitewater rapids, and the Whoop and Holler Hollow. And really, this water park, while it was smaller in scale, did pave the way for the future water parks to come for Disney. It had a decent amount of offerings, and guests really enjoyed it. Attendance was high until right around 1989. So what happened in 1989? Well, Disney opened up its second water park ever, Typhoon Lagoon.
It may not look like much now, but believe it or not, soon that muddy pond is going to host professional surfing competitions. And that's just one part of the most incredible water park you could ever dream of. Now under construction at Walt Disney World, it's Typhoon Lagoon. Typhoon Lagoon is 50 acres of wet fun for everyone. The largest wave-making machine ever built will pour 6-foot waves into this 2.5-acre surfing lagoon. 5 twisting water slides and 4 rapids rides generate whitewater excitement. And a saltwater snorkeling pool full of exotic marine life awaits swimmers in Shark Reef. With a staff of 100 and acres of sandy beaches, Typhoon Lagoon promises to thrill water lovers of all ages when it opens this summer.
And 6 years later, in 1995, it opened up its third water park, Blizzard Beach.
Check out all the chilling thrills of Blizzard Beach, Disney's newest and biggest water adventure park. Challenge Summit Plummet, a breathtaking plunge down the world's tallest and fastest free-fall speed slide. Hang on for the world's longest and most exciting family raft ride at Teamboat Springs. Even the little guys have their own special water playground, Tykes Peak. You can see why Blizzard Beach is the splashiest ski mountain on Earth.
And both of these new water parks you could drive right to and easily park. And so River Country started to see a pretty big decline in attendance. Now, the 3 water parks did coexist, all open at the same time for 6 years, from 1995 to right around 2001. But it wasn't uncommon for one of the parks to be closed for maintenance or just closed seasonally based on park attendance. It was especially not uncommon for River Country to be closed in the winter season. And so when it closed on November 2nd of 2001, it wasn't a surprise to anyone. But on April 11th of the next year, the water park didn't reopen, and Disney made a statement saying that it may reopen if there's enough guest demand. And so then it was 2003 and still nothing, and 2004 and still nothing. Because remember, after 9/11, Disney was still climbing their way out of a really huge drop in tourism that impacted all sorts of resorts and other attractions on property. Now, Disney was still maintaining the park during this time. It wasn't a full situation like Discovery Island where they literally dropped everything, and people really did think that this park would reopen. But by 2005, so 4 years after 9/11 and after this park closed, finally Disney announced that the water park would never reopen. It would close permanently. And so what did they do with it? Well, this is where I come in. Because as you know, obviously, you know Abandoned Disney. Disney didn't do anything with it. They literally just pulled all staff from it, put up a fence, and let it decay. And They let it decay for 17 years. And in 2014, so 9 years after they had first abandoned it, I got the opportunity to visit it. So now let's get into my story of how I visited the park. I want to make it clear I visited this park completely legally, and in fact, there was a cast member standing there the entire time. So I mentioned that there was a cookout pavilion located at River Country. Disney actually had a restaurant there. The restaurant was called Mickey's Backyard Barbecue. And so my senior year of high school, my family went on our typical annual trip. This time I got to bring a friend, let's call her Susan for the sake of the story, and they booked a reservation for me and Susan to go to Mickey's Backyard Barbecue. This was a buffet style, basically barbecue. It had all sorts of characters, a dance party. I remember Chip and Dale and I think Goofy being there in specifics. And already when we arrived, there was a huge hiccup. And I think this just speaks to the fact that River Country had some issues with this, because my mom dropped us off right at the front gate of the campground. We had never been there before and said, have fun. Turns out that restaurant was located like 2 miles away across the campground. We didn't know that there was a bus system, and so we started to try to run to get there. We were already running a bit late, but luckily a cast member in a golf cart picked us up and drove us there. So I have some great photos of that. I also have a photo of the map that I sent to my mom being like, really, you dropped me off 2 miles from this? But when we got there, I saw the first traces of River Country immediately, because Mickey's Backyard Barbecue was located inside of River Country. Disney actually left half of this park completely open. And this is where I mentioned that like misinformation from other urban explorers. Because if you've ever watched any of their videos, you might see things like they left all of the lights on at River Country, or the water fountains still work at River Country.
Amazingly out here. Still have the music playing. There's no one out here.
Well, that's because the entire front half of the park was still open to guests. It was just the back half of the park that was sealed. They did take down the water tower and they took down a lot of the signage for River Country, but there were plenty of traces of it left, and I was literally standing in it. So right when we walked in, we saw the old ticket booths. These were where you actually checked into Mickey's Backyard Barbecue, and they had little remnants and traces of tributes to River Country like Whitewater Adventures written in text on them. When we walked in, we were standing in the water park. They had all of the walkways that we could access to get to the back of it. We went to the bathroom first, and I remember specifically there being this really old like hair dryer system. It was almost like a hand dryer that you see in the bathroom now, but I feel like it was pink and it was a hair dryer. I'm going to try to find a photo if I can. There were some buildings that were closed off, and that Cypress Point Nature Trail, I don't remember that being open at all. I think that was already in its stages of abandonment. But we did go out in the cookout pavilion, and we got to be with all the characters and eat a bunch of great food. And we also got to kind of walk around the area. They had picnic tables set up that you could sit outside if you wanted. And so that's when I wandered over to kind of the back of the area that was open. And they had a big green fence up. If you know Disney and you know their construction fences that you've seen in any of the theme parks, you know that Disney does a pretty good job with construction fences. They typically have like a cute quote from Walt Disney up, or they might have some concept art of what's to come. This was not one of those fences. This was a standard chain link fence that had a green scrim over it, probably to block the view of, the abandoned section of the park from guests, but it completely failed to do so because there were giant gaps in the fence. And so we walked right up to the fence, and there were cast members standing in this area, and I was like, can I take a picture of like what's behind this? Because I knew it was River Country. That was why I was at Mickey's Backyard Barbecue. And they were like, yeah, sure. And I looked through, and what do I see? I thought I would see some like sheds or like an old inner tube. I don't know. Nope, I saw the abandoned upstream plunge pool just right in front of me. The pool was sitting there. It was basically drained, but it did have a little bit of water at the bottom. And then it had those slippery slide fall slides that were just in a total state of decay. Seeing this was like completely surreal. I've pretty much never had a chance to see a fully abandoned Disney attraction to this day. So I was like screaming and dying inside. Now, walking along the fence, there were plenty of other gaps that I could see, some old buildings or old, Tupperware stored with things. There were old ladders and things that were out. But the coolest thing definitely was that upstream plunge pool. You really couldn't get a look at all, at least from the angle I was at, of the Bay Cove area or the Kiddie Cove area. To see that, you had to go on the boat. And so me and my friend Susan also did this. Poor Susan, because she literally probably didn't care about this at all. Meanwhile, I was like geeking out over abandoned things. But we took the boat from the campground to Magic Kingdom. And that's when you passed by the entire part of River Country that was right on the water. I mean, you could literally see everything. In 2014, things were in bad condition, but honestly not that bad. Like you could see a lot. Things hadn't totally fallen down. You could see the old boardwalks that would kind of surround that cove area. You could see remnants of the old tire swings. You could even get a tiny look through the trees at one of those old slides. It was pretty insane that Disney just left it right there. But if we think about Bay Lake, I mean, Disney has like the abandoned docks from the old Vacation Kingdom activities. It has Discovery Island. It has River Country. They just kind of let it be a place, many abandoned Disney attractions. The surfing machine, the list goes on. And so that is what I personally got to see at River Country through the fence, and it was insane. I do feel like I have to note the fact that there have been urban explorers that have seen a whole lot more, because what they did is they broke in and trespassed on the property. I didn't do that, but I have watched all of their videos. All in all, to this day, my visit to River Country is one of my favorite Disney memories. I personally never had the opportunity to visit River Country, although I did go to Disney at that time. My parents were not totally aware of everything that was going on. I mean, they told me that the Living with the Land greenhouse was the Spaceship Earth, Epcot ball. So we didn't never know that it existed, but I wish I had had the chance to see it in its heyday, and I know so many people have great memories of it. But before I close out, I feel like there are going to be some people who are saying, I kind of missed a piece of the history of River Country, so I will briefly cover that. Because I mentioned that the reason the water park closed was low attendance, and that's pretty much true. That is the official reason that Disney announced for its closure. But there were some other incidents that happened that I feel like might be worth noting. First of all, there were several drownings that happened at this water park, and the real reason for that is based on that Bay Cove pool. Because this pool had a sand bottom and it had lake water, and that meant that it was a lot harder to see to the bottom of the lake water because it was kind of murky or darker colored. And so while there were many lifeguards, multiple times it happened that someone unfortunately drowned either on the high-speed slides and couldn't be seen, or just at the bottom of this area because they weren't able to be seen through the lake water. The other thing that people say is that River Country had a brain-eating amoeba. And this is technically true. River Country and just the Disney lakes as a whole had several issues that led Disney to close them off from swimming and any access. Obviously, we know that there was the risk of alligators. That wasn't as much of a problem at River Country, although there were a lot of snakes there. But the water in Florida does have a brain-eating amoeba amongst other types of bacteria in there. It's pretty rare, but it can get up through your nose or ears and end up in your brain and cause some major issues. And this did happen. Someone contracted this and did end up passing away. This isn't specific to Disney. This isn't Disney's fault. It's just something that happens in fresh water in Florida. And so that's another reason that filtered lake water system was a challenge, but that's not the reason that the park closed. The park did close because Disney basically just had two larger water parks and this little one couldn't compete. So what about the future of River Country? What is it like today? Well, after the park closed and then Disney announced its permanent closure, many people thought that it might become an exclusive Fort Wilderness Campground pool area. They had all of the infrastructure, so why not just add another pool for all of the campground guests to enjoy? But that didn't end up happening. The water park sat abandoned from 2005 up until 2016 when Disney finally did the first little bit of work on it, and that was filling the upstream plunge pool. Disney did not give a reason for doing this, but some have speculated it was based on safety concerns that some kid could slip through the fence and end up falling in the pool, and others thought that it was because of the Zika virus, which was very big at the time in 2016, and the still water at the bottom of the pool. But after that, Disney held on any work until finally they announced they were demolishing River Country because a brand new DVC resort was finally coming. The resort was put on pause during COVID, and then eventually Disney announced that it was happening again, but it went from Reflections to the Lakeside Lodge. Regardless, this will be on the property of River Country, and when it opens, I'm almost certain that some Imagineer is going to have to leave some sort of tribute to River Country. So if you want to see River Country today, unfortunately, you are out of luck because it has basically entirely been leveled. Mickey's Backyard Barbecue is even gone. All of the old docks are gone. But you can get a glimpse of what the land is when you pass by in the boat from Magic Kingdom to the campground. And that really is the story of the abandoned water park and my experience visiting it. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our channel. We share deep dives on Disney history and abandoned Disney things weekly, diving into some of the coolest topics that most people don't know about. Coming up next, we have Disney's Cinderella Castle Suite. I've just started research on everything we need to know about Disney's Villain Land coming to Magic Kingdom. And I'm also putting together a much longer video on why Disney hasn't expanded the monorail and their initial plans to expand the monorail. So there's a lot of fun coming. Be sure to subscribe. But for now, I will see you later next Monday. And thanks for watching.